What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It's time to continue my 2023 schedule preview and projected records for the 2023 college football season. We continue them with the Washington State Cougars. Here's the schedule last year for the Washington State Cougars. The overall record for this team going 7-6 overall in 2022, 7-5 in the regular season, so a pretty decent year for this Washington State team. You look at who they played in the non-conference. They played Idaho, Wisconsin, and Colorado State. So they didn't have too tough of a non-conference schedule. Of course, they had to play Wisconsin out of the Big Ten. They ended up winning that game, though, on the road. So they didn't have too tough of a non-conference schedule. And then out of the Pac-12, they almost played every single Pac-12 team on the schedule from last year. Of course, they played Oregon. They ended up losing that one on September the 24th. They had a tough stretch there from October the 8th to the October the 27th, of course, with USC and Oregon State in back-to-back road games, and then, of course, Utah here. So they had a pretty tough stretch there from October 8th to October the 27th, and then they had a winning streak going, and then, of course, they lost to Washington there to end out the year. So, but all in all, a pretty decent season last year for this Washington State team. I have a lot of hype for this team coming into 2023. I think they'll be really good. It's really too early to tell, but we'll see how good they are going to be. Let's now look ahead to 2023. Here's the schedule for Washington State heading into 2023, and you look at who they'll play in the non-conference this year. They'll play Colorado State once again. This one will be on the road this time, so that's their first game of the year. Then they'll play Wisconsin and then Northern Colorado. So Wisconsin once again, and this time they'll get them at home. This one will be a Week 2 game on September the 9th, so it's similar to last year, and the non-conference schedule kind of similar to last year as well. So it's not too tough of a non-conference schedule, though. So, I mean, at least you don't have to play like another Power 5 team or maybe like a, really tough team in there or something like that. So, yeah, the non-conference schedule, I think, is really going to set up well for them. Of course, they get Wisconsin at home, but new era coming in for this Wisconsin team. They could be really good. You never know, but we know Washington State's going to be, playing almost every single Pac-12 team. Let's now look at let's go game by game now for this Washington State team. So let's start the season off with 3 non-conference games here in the month of September. They'll play Colorado State, Wisconsin, and Northern Colorado here to begin things out here in September. So there's a pretty good chance that Washington State could start out 3-0 or maybe 2-1 if they lose to Wisconsin, or they could probably start out 1-2. They could probably lose to Colorado State. They could probably lose. Actually they could start out like 2-2 perhaps, or maybe 1-1. But I think overall, they have a good chance to maybe start out 3-0. They will open up Pac-12 play with Oregon State here on September the 23rd, and then they'll get their bye week rather early in the season, and it really doesn't come at a really good time. It will be on UCLA here on October the 7th. They'll get a bye week on that September 30th weekend, so they'll go on the road to face UCLA here on October the 7th. Then they'll play Arizona after that on October the 14th. That'll be a home game. Then they get back-to-back road games here with Oregon and Arizona State. So, yeah, they have back-to-back road games here. This is not a tough back-to-back. I mean, Oregon will be their toughest one. Imagine if it was like Oregon and USC. The good news is that USC is not on the schedule for Washington State because they had to play them last year. But you have to play Oregon here on the road. Then they'll play Stanford after Arizona State here on November the 4th. Then they'll play Cal here on November the 11th. And then they'll play Colorado here on a weeknight game. And this game is on a Friday, I believe, on November the 17th. That's a Colorado team you kind of don't want to play in the month of November. Of course, they have Deion Sanders coming over there, so that's a really good program that's heading in the right direction as of right now. Then they'll play Washington here to end things out. That's a rival game. You never know what can happen. That one will be on November the 25th. So schedule overall is still a tough one because you still have to play Oregon State, UCLA, Oregon. You also have to play Washington on the road. You have to play Oregon and Washington and UCLA on the road. You have to play Oregon State at home, but, that's not really a big deal. But, the good news is they don't have to play USC or Utah in this schedule, so that kind of makes the schedule a little, not like really tougher for them. If Utah and USC are on the schedule would be tough, but all in all, the schedule really not as bad as you think. Let's now get to the projection here for this Washington State team. And this is the scale I use for my projections if it's a 1% game. These are games where Washington State has no chance of winning in. 20% games in the orange. These are games where Washington State's going to be about a couple touchdowns of underdogs. 40% in the yellow. These are games where they're going to be about a touchdown underdog, also a heavy underdog. 50-50 games, they'll stay in the white. Games where they can go either way. 60% games. These are games where Washington State's going to be at least favored by at least a touchdown. 80% games, these will be games where Washington State's going to be favored by a couple touchdowns. And then the 90% games, these will be games where Washington State's going to be favored by more than 3 touchdowns. We're going to start with the easy wins here for Washington State, like I always do with my other projections. And we're going to start with the easy wins here for Washington State. And I think you only got one easy win here on this schedule, and that's Northern Colorado here on September the 16th. I would put Colorado State in the green, but it's on the road. But I'll get to that in just a minute. But I think this is the game right here that Washington State is only really going to have an easy win by a blowout, because you still have to play every single Pac-12 team on this schedule. And, anybody else in the green here on this Pac-12 schedule is not even close. So I think, Washington State, it would be a really big shock if they did lose to Northern Colorado here, but they have no business to lose that game on September the 16th. We now to go to the games in the blue, games where Washington State's going to be favored by a couple touchdowns. And like I just mentioned, Colorado State here on the road. I got to put this one in the blue just because it's on the road. I think this will be a tough game here to start out the year for Washington State, but I think you can, still favor them by at least a couple touchdowns. I probably would have put it in the purple as well, but I'm going to stick with it and put it in the blue just based off of where Washington State was last year. We go to the games now in the purple, games where Washington State's going to be favored by at least a touchdown. That's almost the majority of their schedule. Arizona State on the road, Stanford, California here on the road, and then Colorado here at home. Arizona, I think that would be a game where they are at least favored by a touchdown, but that's a decent Arizona team from last year. They could probably have a better record than they were last year as well. Arizona State wasn't that good last year, but with this one being on the road, I'm going to put this one in the purple. Stanford, it's really hard to tell what they're going to look like. I got to put this one in the purple, though, just based off of where Washington State was last year. I know they had a decent record, but, it's really tough to call here with some of these teams in the purple. Cal here, the same thing. I know they didn't have a good season last year, but really it's a tough place to play when it goes to Cal. And then, of course, Colorado. That's a team you don't want to play in the month of November. They'll get better down this stretch. Maybe this could switch to a 50-50 game, but maybe all these games for Washington State could switch to 50-50 games by the time we do those predictions in the month of May. But I think all these games, for right now, you can at least favor Washington State in all these games, all these 5 games in the purple. We go to the games now where they're going to be underdogs, and I don't have any red games on here for this Washington State team, but I do have some orange and yellow games. I'm going to start with the orange games, games where they're going to be about a couple touchdowns of underdogs. I think you got one game on that schedule, and that's Oregon on the road on October the 21st. This will be a tough place to play, and Bo Nix coming back at quarterbacks is really huge for Oregon. I think this is going to be a really good Oregon team, probably a dangerous team in the Pac-12, so I think Washington State, you can only, make them a couple touchdowns of underdogs in one of these games, and that's Oregon on the road. Let's go to the games now where they're going to be heavy underdogs in the yellow, about 40%. And I think you got 3 of those. It's Oregon State, UCLA, and Washington. And based off of where these teams were last year, I got to put all these games in the yellow. Like Oregon State, they won 10 games last year. UCLA came close to, winning 10 games, but they ended up not doing it. But, they had a pretty good season last year. And then, of course, Washington, they were a big surprise from last year. I probably would have put that one in the 50-50 game category just because it's a rival game, but I'm going to stick with it and put it in the yellow just based off of where Washington was, and the same thing with Oregon State and UCLA. But I think they do have a pretty good shot to, maybe win some of these games in the yellow. You never know about it. But I think all 3 of these games, as of right now, Washington State will be an underdog a heavy underdog, and that leaves the Wisconsin game as the 50-50 game. I think, this is the only game I see Washington State, as a 50-50 game just based off of where both of these teams were from last year. And also, this is a home game for Washington State. If this was a road game, perhaps I probably could have put in the yellow, but Wisconsin didn't really have a good season last year, so that's why I got to put it here in the white. But that's the overall schedule and stuff. It's kind of, balanced a little bit with all these games in the 40% and 20% range. But let's now get to the projected record here for this team. Again, not my official prediction. This is simply a projection based on this schedule for Washington State. And it really sets up well if you look at the games that they're favored in and also the games that are in the underdog category, the orange and yellow games with all 4 of those games. And then, of course, you got the 50-50 game with Wisconsin. You get an overall projected record for this Washington State team at 8-4 for 2023. I think this schedule really sets up nicely for them to have a really good season. I really think they do have a good shot to go 8-4. I think worst case scenario will probably be 7-5 or maybe 6-6. This is a team that went 7-5 last year. It would kind of be disappointing if they went 6-6. I think 9-3 is best case scenario. Imagine if they go 9-3. That would be something there for this Washington State team. And this is a Washington State program that's been up and down as of late, but I think 8-4 is really possible for this Washington State team. So I think that's an accurate projection here. Let me guys know what you think about this Washington State team down in the comments below. What do you think their best case scenario will be, and what do you think their worst case scenario will be down in the comments below? And stay tuned here for more sports content on the Lucas Ross Sports Channel.